This is NFL Pro Era 2, the follow-up to last year's first NFL licensed VR game that once again places you in the role of the quarterback for your favorite American football team. This released October 16th, 2023 for the PSVR 2, PCVR, and Quest 2 and Up headsets for $30 US, and for this review, we checked out the PSVR 2 version of the game. I wasn't the biggest fan of the first game, so let's see if this sequel delivers a bigger and better sports sim experience, or something else. Hello sports fans, before we get to it, if you enjoy our content, don't forget to like, subscribe, and if you are so inclined, leave us a comment with your thoughts on this release or the current state of sports sims in VR. I'm Ryan for the VR Grid, now let's do this. Alright, you can check out my full review for NFL Pro Era here, but to sum it up, I felt it was a somewhat janky quarterback sim that delivered a bare-bones football experience, and while serviceable, I found it to be too repetitive and lacking too much in the presentation department. PSVR 2 owners were also treated to a broken game regarding the use of eye tracking, which prevented proper throws and had to be disabled to enjoy the game. Pro Era 2 hasn't changed a lot in really any department, as outside of the new opening and locker room, I was hard pressed to notice any significant differences between either game, minus some very minor additions and the new multiplayer mode. You start off during the new intro, which is actually pretty cool. Walking through a tunnel will highlight clips from NFL games play all around you. I was admittedly impressed by this little intro, as it seemed to show a leap in presentation. Sadly, that's just about the extent of improvement, as I was placed immediately after that into the tutorial, which was nearly identical to the first games, taking me through a few plays before sending me to the locker room. Said locker room has now been redesigned, and you can walk around to the various stations, which allow you to start the next game, view stats and settings, play a few of the arcade minigames, or start a multiplayer matchup. In my time with the game, I couldn't find a single player online, and I tried on different days at different times to no avail, so I couldn't review the multiplayer stuff personally, but in doing some YouTube surfing, it's the same game, meaning that when you don't have possession, you are relegated to the sidelines and must watch the plays unfold without anything else to do besides talking to your opponent. So little has changed between the first and second game that jumping into a season felt identical to the last game, except in this, I noticed plenty more issues than in the first. When your team is in possession, you can choose your plays, and while I did disable and enable eye tracking, it appears that feature has been removed from the PSVR 2 version, which I guess is fine, as the passing, for the most part, worked just fine using head tracking. I say for the most part because on more than a few occasions, my throws would still fail, or a quick toss would turn into a huge lob, and I quickly realized that whenever that high lob happened, the ball was about to be intercepted, which it was, every time. When on the sidelines, you can choose to skip the action so you are back into possession, but you need to constantly toggle that option from on to off to on again on your wrist to skip these plays, which just wastes too much time. These are just a few of my many minor annoyances, but it's all these hiccups and more that impact the game in a very negative way. It's clear the game hasn't been optimized for the PSVR 2 headset, as player pop-in is rampant, with players changing size and numbers in the huddle or well on the sidelines. Player animations can look great thanks to motion capture, but suffer from a limited number of animations, and players repeating the same ones in tandem as teams move across the field in the exact same motion, almost like a flock of geese. Factor in that each player uses the exact same face model, just with a change in skin tone, maybe, and it's easy to see the holes in the presentation quite quickly. Often I would pass to an open player, only to have the opposing player literally walk right through my receiver and intercept the ball, and during post-play sections, I saw players run into stands, walk through each other, freeze in place, and generally behave like they were in a broken game, not a sports sim. Player frame rates also dropped quite often, and it felt like the game was struggling to keep track of every human on the field. I enjoyed the look of the various stadiums, as they felt authentic, and I even liked the cardboard cutout crowd, which up close doesn't look amazing, but is animated enough to look decent when on the field. Unfortunately, the replay screens from the first game have been removed completely from Pro Era 2, and now only display the game's stats or a quick animation for touchdown or interception, and stuff like that. It's not terrible looking, but considering it has the NFL license attached to this, and this is the second game in the series, it's disappointing to see so little improvement from the first title. Gone is the licensed soundtrack from the first game, and in place is some generic sounding background music, which is honestly just fine, considering how little time I was in my locker room, besides when I was trying and failing to find a multiplayer match. Beyond that is the exact same audio package from last year, with your coach listing plays during a huddle and occasionally offering up something a little random after a play. Announcers will just say stuff like interception or pass incomplete, with the action on the field sounding more authentic thanks to some light chatter from the players, as well as some grunts and groans when teams collide. It's all fine, I guess, but nothing to get too excited over. If you've played the first Pro era, you've played this, with so little changing between versions that I question why this even exists. Sure, you get an updated NFL roster, but I don't think players have any stats, so that's cosmetic at best. It doesn't seem like anyone is playing this, so if you're buying this to play with others, you won't, leaving you with some broken minigames and an overall janky NFL QB experience. I did mention that there are some throwing minigames you can play, just like in the first game, but in my many attempts, the throwing appeared to be busted on the PSVR 2, and I never once scored a single point in any of them, as my ball constantly fell short. Even as I finish putting this review together, I keep remembering more things that are wrong with this than right, and while many of my more minor issues could be fixed, it's questionable if they ever will, as the first game never received the updates on PSVR 2 that it did on the other platforms. Even almost a month after launch, updates are rolling out for the Quest, with PSVR 2 ones coming soon, with no actual ETA. This leaves PSVR 2 players with a repetitive, bare-bones, janky, and even broken football game that feels more like a step sideways than anything resembling an improved sequel. Unless you are dying for an NFL game in VR, I would stay far away from this until the developers actually update the PSVR 2 version, and even if they do, it's still overpriced for what is essentially the same game as last year, made even worse. I'm going to give NFL Pro Era 2 for the PSVR 2 a 4.5 out of 10. It's more jank than fun. If you enjoyed this review, don't forget to do all the YouTube things to help us out. And that's it for this one. Thank you so much for watching.